And action! Yeah, I think we could go for at least another year or two with just 15 cards. I think if they were to switch the extra deck around at all, they might consider doing something like you're only allowed 15 cards of any given type, so Synchro, Fusion, Exceed. That might be something they go for, so maybe like a soft cap almost, maybe 20 card limit, but you can only run 15 XCs, 5 Synchros, or 15 Synchros, 5 XCs. The only reason I think that is because people will just start putting cards in for the sake of it. You know, they'll throw 3 copies of Binary in instead of the 1 or 2, just because, why not? So if they actually still have to kind of consider their side deck build, then that would be alright. But going to 20, you're just giving 5 more cards, which means people will just throw 5 more in for the sake of doing it. Cards like Papal Operative, even Maestro right now, are becoming a little more obsolete because there's better choices. And because of that 15 card rule, you get that. You get forced to play cards that you know you have to see versus cards you might see once in a while. Like, when are you going to be like, well, I gotta get over that Treeborn Frog and go for lethal or I lose next turn, so I need that Photon Papal Operative? No, you're more likely to go, I might as well make sure I have 2 copies of number 101 because I know I'm going to have to need them. It is a huge difference, for sure. I'm not going to say that it's irrelevant or it's underwhelming. It definitely has got a lot of people wondering about it. I think in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, unless you are an FTK deck that was reliant on attacking, going first was always the better option. You would never go second for any reason other than trying to get in that death blow. But even decks like Demise OTK, they were reliant on going first because they wanted to set up and then go off next turn. So they wouldn't go for the turn 2 play. How I feel about it, I think it's alright. I understand it. In Yu-Gi-Oh! The 1 card is a big difference. I know in Magic it's not a big difference. You can draw like 5 cards and it's like, good for you. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! You draw 2 or 3 extra cards, you're really pushing yourself past your opponent. But I think decks like Dino Rabbit in its prime would have still went for turn 1, knowing that they could still set up. So using that mentality, I think I'd like to see it in practice, see if people just opt for the turn 2 instead of the turn 1 like prior. Go from there. Konami's going to try it for a year most likely with Japan, and then bring it on from there. If I could have 1 banned card go to 1, well, there's not 1 card I'd pick. There's a bunch of different ideas I have for it. There's the fun ideas, which of course are like CED, Scientist. Honestly though, how big of a deal is Scientist? I understand CED, if you don't have the stop for it, it can be completely game changing. But Scientist, you have to build your 15 card extra deck around it if you opt for more of a Scientist blowout. And even if you don't, you gotta put at least 2 fusions in, maybe 1 if you're special summoning other things, and it would be only ran in Chaos Dragons anyway. Not saying I think Scientist should come back, I'm just saying if it did come back, I wouldn't be like, oh no! Oh no! It'd just be, alright, they're main deck Bailers. Cyrostine, we're seeing it in OCG. They're playing it. They play with GGX so they can search it. 5,000 is a lot of life. We have Valor, we have Skill Drain, we have Breakthrough Skill, we have Phoenix Chain, just to name a few, so I'm sure that will come back eventually. And then of course, I think banned cards have a chance at all coming back if they errata certain parts of it. We're seeing DSF see play now in OCG because they errated 1 thing, once per turn. Because of that 1 errata, the card is now really good still, but only in certain timings, right? Before you could just be like, oh, here's a DSF, here's some star levels, you're dead. So, not bad, not bad. What I'd like to see come back still is Dark Magician Chaos. I think it's not nearly as powerful as it once was, and I think it would bring a new edge to spellbooks, and maybe other decks that might splash it in. Maybe some kind of DDR deck that resurrects from the Banish Zone. The new field spell rule is practically irrelevant in my opinion. Sure, it stops the whole play a field card +1 because you destroy your opponent's field card. But Mystical Space Typhoon's at 3, so honestly don't care. And a lot of people argue that Close Forest is irrelevant now because of this rule. I disagree. Close Forest still says that your opponent can't activate any field cards while it's face up. In addition to that, if it's destroyed, you can't activate a field card that turn. So if they destroy it on their turn, they still can't play a field card, maybe you can play another one. Outside of that, that's really all I have to say about it. I think there's supposed to be a new rule for when they're sent to the grave. They're sent, not destroyed, so I think Gear Town is now obsolete, but that's not really what you're asking. I expect Mermills, Girgia, and Boujins. Mermills, they got hit by the ban list a little bit here, gun going to 1, but they still have so many different options they can play that most Mermill players were just happy to have more room in their deck. So that's why I still think we'll see it. I think tier 1.5, and the only reason I made this tier in my little blurb is because I'm not sure how the decks are going to perform in the meta. Sylvans, once they get their support of course, Firefists, and what was the other one? Artifacts. I played with Artifacts, I played with Sylvans. They seem really solid on paper and in practice. I want to see them in tournaments before I decide if they'll be tier 1 or tier less. And the reason I put Firefists as tier 1.5 is because Wolfbark was kind of a big hit. You can't deny that. They are still going to be competitive. We're still going to see them in the top seedings, but we're not going to see them as consistently as other decks like Boujins. Finally, tier 2, Prophecy, Dark Worlds, and Fire Kings. Fire Kings got pretty hit pretty hard here as they lost Rekindling. Some played it, most of them played it actually, and of course Wolfbark. The deck itself was really decent to begin with, but the consistency that Bear, Tinky, Wolfbark allowed it, plus the huge plays it could make with the Rekindling, were kind of why I was able to push past all the other decks and to get into at least one top seeding. So they might still do well, but I don't expect them to do amazing. Prophecy, they show up when they need to, they do their thing, and Dark Worlds have skill drain access, have hand destruction access, they're really solid. Dragons, I didn't really think about them at all, kind of like out of sight, out of mind. They didn't see much play when Convocation went to 2, then when it went to 3 they started seeing play. It back at 2, I mean it might still see play, it's got a little bit of support here and there. With the Mythic Dragons I think is where it's going to go more towards. As far as that, if we saw it, maybe tier 1.5, probably tier 2 though. Love it! I love the idea of drafting at the higher tables because anyone can net deck. The internet is a thing now. Being able to net deck, go to a tournament and top, if the decks are really good, like Dragon Rulers Format 1, it is easy to top, or it's at least easy to go X2. Once you get to top 16, it's all skill. Now instead of making it just skill, and then if 2 really skilled players fight each other and one has bad draws, they're screwed, I like the idea of saying, okay, let's just draft. There's more to Yu-Gi-Oh! Than just taking a deck and doing well with it. Deck building is huge, and there's a lot of players who still just don't know how to deck build. So drafting is a really good tool to teach people how to do that and show people where the skills lie, right? Not make people pay attention to ban cards, let's say. All of a sudden you're drafting Pot of Greed and it's like, shit, this card exists? Now you get an understanding of why certain cards got banned. Overall, it's just a really sweet concept. Sure, Battle Pack 2 isn't the best pack to draft. There's a lot of jank, and some of it doesn't make sense. And sure, you don't have access to the extra deck, which is a lot of the powerhouse, but it goes back to the fundamentals of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a really good way to show that there's certain people who aren't only good at building decks and taking decks to tournaments, but they're good with mechanics, they're good with card interactions. That by itself is why I think top 16 should maintain a draft policy.
What's up guys, thanks for watching that video. I want to give a big thanks to Dylan for doing that interview. All the questions that you saw will be asked for other players at my locals. Also go check out his Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/NemesisWarfare. Link is in the description. He does a lot of live Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels on Dev Pro. So go check it out. He has a great schedule. He's a great guy. Don't forget to give him a follow, and it's just the derpiest deck you can find, and he'll build and play it. Later guys.